Welcome everyone. So as you've probably seen from my channel, I've been playing a lot of Guild Wars 1 again lately, and in particular the series I just produced had a lot of build craft, tinkering around with various skills and attributes for heroes. Well, after finishing that, I got kind of hooked, and I made a new team composition that I really wanted to share with you guys. Now, to be clear, this is not an ultra-optimized, hard mode, generalist comp, on the par with, you know, Mesmer-Way and all the new stuff that people are running. But it is extremely well themed, it's pretty fun, and very, very, very solid. It will go through all the normal mode content very easily, and I suspect most of the hard mode stuff is just not as well-rounded as everything else. In particular, one of the things I was looking to make here with this composition is play with some of the Ellie updates from later years that I never really wrestled with. Many of them were actually to make Elementalist stronger in PvE, particularly hard mode. And the other thing I wanted to do was get something of a group that would clear things quickly and easily without tons of micro on my end. There's a couple of things that frustrate me about Guild Wars 1 gameplay, particularly when you're playing spike damage focused groups in PvE, where things die so fast that you could be casting a couple of abilities on your skill bar, but the creature dies in the middle, say a ton of necro spam Discord or whatever, and you get cancel cast, and everyone else in the team gets cancel cast as well because the target's not there anymore. So then you retarget, and you know, you call it for the heroes to swap, and then you throw your hexes up or whatever again, and then it's dead in the middle of something else, and then you target again, and then you target again, and you target again. Because of the way that hero AI works, it's often very micro-heavy, constantly C-spacing, until finally the group's cleared out. I wanted something very AoE-oriented that would basically play itself. I walk over towards a group, and they all explode, and I didn't have to manually click through every little target every time I want to jump in as a generalist comp to play Guild Wars 1 and grab some footage for you guys. So those two ideas, playing with a lot of Ellies, experiencing some of the Ellie power creep in the later years, plus this kind of ease of access comp, kind of blended together to make what I've got here. So in the background, you can see me playing a variety of content, mostly in normal mode, but 8-man stuff and late game stuff as it is as well. If you've watched my other faction series just very recently, you can actually compare how slowly I went through stuff with the compositions on that to how fast I devastate it all here, and you can watch everything melt in a matter of moments. The comp is particularly good in any mission where you stand around a bit, like say Napui Quarter or the end of the Guyala Hatchery, Eternal Grove as factions examples, because the more that new waves spawn in AoEs that you already have lingering around, the more the damage ramps and ramps and ramps. So let's talk a little bit about it, and for a bit of background for Guild Wars 1, those of you that don't know, back when you could only have 3 heroes, necromancers tended to be the favored option just because of soul reaping that allowed them to deal with energy issues. Most of the AI really struggled with energy. And also, necro had a lot of basically shoddily implemented skills that never had proper damage typed associated with them. So where most necro stuff should probably have been cold damage, a lot of it wasn't. It was just typeless armor ignoring damage that made it particularly good in hard mode where all the armors got bumped up. Then in the later years, Mesmer had a significant amount of buffs as well and really made it one of the supreme classes because of its access to armor ignoring. But finally, the devs did tweak hard mode, and they tweaked Ellie in an Ellie-specific PvE-focused update that buffed the hell out of a ton of their skills and made it so that in hard mode, enemies no longer got armor power crept. Less than level 20 enemies, i.e. hard mode in early areas of the game, yeah, they still get their armor bumped up, but in general, that wasn't true in hard mode, and to this day now, you no longer have to deal with massively high armor levels, making elementalists that actually do typed damage, fire damage, earth damage, and so on. You can now actually have a little bit of impact. So as an example, one of the skills that got buffed, and many did, is like Firestorm. A super basic, original, iconic elementalist skill, just rain some damage down on an area for over 10 seconds. Most AoEs in Guild Wars 1 last about 5 seconds, and to be honest, they're more optimal, because the pace of the combat and movement means usually a fight's over in around that 5-second window. Having the full 10 seconds isn't always that valuable. But Firestorm is one such example of a spell that got buffed a lot with the Ellie patch and people didn't realize, and I never took the time to play with until now in 2020. And that is for Firestorm in particular. I think it used to have a longer cooldown. It was like a 30-second cooldown, and now there's a 20-second one. Many of the cast times actually went down, and the devs did something else too. They refined the idea of exhaustion. They turned it into something called overcast, and many Ellie skills get extra benefits if you are overcast while you use them. So the idea of a lot of Ellie bars now is you deliberately have one skill that exhausts you a bit, and that allows you to proc double effects on a lot of other stuff. So Lava Font here, for example, this is another AoE that does damage over time, but unlike in Guild Wars 2 where you can cast it anywhere you like, this is point blank. It will only appear around you. And if you're overcast, it's much bigger. So it's a small range. It will just hit adjacent people with no overcast. And with it, it's actually massive. And Lava Font is actually one of the strongest pulsing AoEs in the game. It has only a 4-second cooldown, and it has a very good high usable range if you're overcast. That's something I never played as a classic Guild Wars 1 user, because it was right towards the end. The downside of Lava Font, of course, is you kind of need to be a melee to get value out of it. I'll talk more about Lava Font later. Back to Mesmer and their buffs. Several of them I've become more than familiar with, like Energy Surge. If you go look on my second channel, I have a video talking about spamming Energy Surge and how you can get through content. That's actually one of the main ways that people play in the game now. But there were several other buffs to skills that I hadn't realized until now, and I've become very excited about. So let's talk about the fast casting skill, Stolen Speed. So, I always thought of Stolen Speed as a single target version of Shared Burden. Shared Burden is an AoE hex. You apply it and it drags everyone's speed down, everyone's attack speed down as well. And I always thought of Stolen Speed as kind of a version of that skill. It just cost less energy and was more refined in the targets it would hit. But what I didn't realize is one of the later buffs substantially improved this for Elementalists and all casters. For 11 seconds, the spells cast by your target and all adjacent targets, so this one is semi-AoE, take double time to cast, and then importantly, spells targeting those foes that are cast by you or your allies take 50% less time to cast. So that's right, it doesn't just slow your enemy down, it now also speeds all of you up. This is so prominent that there's actually a pretty staple idea in the Guild Wars 1 community now of having a Mesmer hero supporting you in most caster-based teams. That means when I look at, say, an Elementalist like Sasuke here, with the full 2 seconds he should take to spend on Meteor, well, he doesn't have to do that because I can give him Stolen Speed, and he can basically be like a Mesmer himself. It's like he has his own fast casting attribute that is half the cast time of Meteor, but he's still an Ellie, thus he gets level 16 fire magic from his runes and whatever else that I want to do. So the idea that really inspired me was make an AoE comp that would slaughter its way through normal mode, killing stuff really quickly, by creating a ton of Ellies that utilize new Ellie balance and the Mesmer's Stolen Speed. There's a ton of different ways you can do this, but this is the way that I set it up, and obviously the feature has been speaking for itself. There's some other ways that you can support people's skills here, and that's with the Ebon Battle Standard of Honor. Let's talk about this. So, it's a ward. It's the skill 1 you've seen me spamming in the footage, and it places a banner down. For 20 seconds, people standing in that banner do plus 15 damage each strike. So here's what I didn't know about this banner. I'd always assumed that on strike meant that this was good for physical characters. If you had a sword and you swung it, you'd now do a little bit more damage. But the thing is, it's a pretty immobile, irritating banner that costs a lot of mana to use. So if I was playing a melee person, very rarely would I really want this on my bar because it's slow, you're probably going to run out of it, it's energy prohibitive. I never really played with it much. And then you get even more damage if you're against Char, but the Char are only in certain places of the game. And then, unlike with Stolen Speed, this one's a PvE skill, so you can't put it on a different character in the team as a hero to help you. I just never used it. What I realized recently, though, is this is way stronger than I thought it was. It does hit spells. It hits pretty much anything except armor ignoring damage. So this won't synergize, and isn't that fun with a lot of the standard Mesmer stuff you do, but if you decide to go back to Ellie's, as this comp does, all of a sudden it gives you value. And check it out as well. I would have assumed that this skill is just plus 15 damage on any one thing you cast. Like, say, for example, If I throw an ineptitude out at someone, it will do plus 15 damage there, and that's it. And when you're dealing with a skill that hits like 140, plus 15 is like kind of meh, proportionally. Who cares? But what Ellie's can do is pulse AoEs. And that means it has particular synergy with a skill like Firestorm. So now, for 10 seconds, every time Firestorm pulses, it will get the benefit of the Ebb and Battle Standard of Honor. And because you are a caster that doesn't move very much, you will stay inside it the full duration that your Firestorm is going, or that your Snowstorm is going, or that your Searing Heat is going, or that your Lava Font is going. So basically, by building around pulse spells, you can get epic value out of the Standard of Honor. Not just on yourself or one hero, but on the majority of the hero's team. So once I got to a place where I really had this idea of this comp coming together, I looked at the other standard too, of Wisdom, which I'd never really used. What the Standard of Wisdom does is it gives you a 60% chance to halve the recharge time of spells. This only really deals with spells. That's why I thought that the Standard of Honor was about physical and the other one was about spells. So what this means is through Stolen Speed, I can give all the Elementalists in my team fast casting. And through the Standard of Wisdom, I can cut all of their cooldowns down. My original idea for this actually was to use Mesmers, not Elementalist mains. Like, this wouldn't be Acolyte Sasuke, it would be Gwen. And I was going to do, like, fast casting and fire magic and put them all on Mantra of Recovery or something so they can spam their skills a lot. Spam a ton of fast casting Firestorms so that you get epic AoEs. It looks cool and visual and themed heavy, but you're getting really, really big value out of the Standard of Honor. Well, it turns out you don't even need the fast casting. And to be honest, playing builds like this with Mesmer primary really creates a lot of energy management issues. It means that you can't run the Elemental Attunement elite skill, which is a huge part of the potency of these spells and actually allowing the AI to not run out of energy constantly. Another cool thing about the Standard of Wisdom is that 60% chance to half the recharge time of spells. That stacks logically on top of other equipment. So if I show you my Elementalists here, you'll see that they have 40-40 sets, right? I crafted them all. So they got a fire wand, which halves the casting time of their fire magic spells, 20% chance, but also halves the recharge, 20% chance. And down here, the focus halves the skill recharge of fire magic spells by 20%. So the modifiers that they get from their full 40-40 sets, which again, I thoroughly recommend people build for their hero comps, will go on top of the banner. So they are spamming hard. And because of the elite skill I gave them and the fire attunement that I gave them, their energy won't limit them, despite the fact that they can now cast way quicker and they can spam more. The one final mechanic that would stop them heaving these AoEs out isn't there, because these two skills give them energy back every single time they cast. So that's really my idea. Once you've got the groundwork in place, the rest of it's just utility, and the more utility you add, the more likely it is you'll be able to go through hard mode. There is one important thing that I want to talk about, though. I've made a comp that's about spamming AoEs. It's a fun, tight idea. Guild Wars 1 fans are probably skeptical, and people watching the footage might be a little bit skeptical too about this, and that's because of a well-known Guild Wars 1 mechanic that has always disincentivized this kind of play, and that's scatter. So the idea of scatter is there's certain skills in the game that if enemy monsters, the AI detects that they're being hit with it, then they'll run away from each other. They'll stop what they're doing and they'll get out. So Firestorm's a great example. If you cast Firestorm on any random monster in Guild Wars 1, after they eat enough ticks of it, and it doesn't take many, maybe like 3 or 4, their AI swaps and they decide to run away. They will actively try to leave AoEs. And because the size of the actual AoEs themselves in Guild Wars 1 isn't all that big, and because a lot of massive renewable AoE snares are actually challenging to get a hold of, unless you're using like Fevered Dreams plus Cripple, by the way, which I totally do recommend along with this comp if you want to experiment with it. Because of these things, it's never really been a great idea in Guild Wars 1 to spam AoEs like this, because then people just run around. What if you have nice and cleanly aggroed and line of sighted a whole group onto a corner? Well, now you've just cast this stuff and they disperse before they die, in theory. What's kind of fun about this, though, is the scatter's actually something of a good thing. I've made a really aggressive team comp here that you're looking at that has got a very weak backline, realistically. But it's fine because the scatter actually is a defense mechanism. What do I mean by that? Well, if you cause them to scatter, they stop casting skills on you. They stop running after you and swinging you with their swords and axes and hammers, and your healers don't even have to do anything. I get through a lot of fights on this comp, completely invalidating and shutting down the enemies, not because I denied their energy, not because I disabled their skills, not because I interrupted them in the middle of the action, but because I made the AI go perfectly passive and run off. And because I have so much damage, even though they're trying to run away, a lot of the times they can't. And a lot of the times they'll be dead in a moment anyway. For that reason, that they can escape and you do want a bit of single target pressure, I do recommend adding a skill like Liquid Flame maybe, or Rodgorts. I actually went with Meteor. Meteor is my way of getting exhaustion. Sorry, it's now called Overcast. And it's also single target, snipe something down with a knockdown. So because I have so many copies of Meteor that are so spammable, that these knockdowns actually hold enemies in AoEs, and Meteor itself, of course, is AoE. So if you just go Firestorm, Meteor, then you've got this big AoE, they get knocked down, and some of your heroes follow with other Meteors, and guess what? You're interrupting at the same time too. So Meteor is a really cool thing that you can add, but there are other versions that give you more single target stuff that you don't have to spike down. So that's the core concept. That's what I've been having fun with. It's particularly cool to control this build because when you're spamming AoEs like Snowstorm or Firestorm or whatever, if the target dies in the middle of your cast, it doesn't actually get cancelled, which was one of the big irritations I have with all the other standard comps. You're constantly alt-tabbing, tab, C space, C space, C space between enemies, and then in the middle of casting stuff, you get 0 value because it died in the middle. Well, if I'm casting Firestorm and the thing dies, the Firestorm will linger anyway, and it will help me in other ways. So let's run through the build. I'm actually going to go in reverse here and talk a bit about the backline. So first of all, I have a Blood is Power support. This is very in vogue at the moment, an extremely strong build. So this is a Necromancer with high soul reaping who will get his energy management just from things dying in the area. And then he utilizes ritualist skills, which in restoration, which pound for pound are some of the strongest support skills. Like if you look at Spirit Light here, Spirit Light is a massive heal on a very low energy cost, super spammable. And the thing it's contingent on, having a spirit nearby, is super easy to get a hold of. So I'm running this, and instead of like Icy Veins or whatever for the elite, I'm running Blood is Power for the elite, which allows, if any of the Ellies or anyone really gets low, including the other backline character, the Soul Twister I'll talk about in a second, low on energy, he can just spam. You almost have infinite energy. It's really fun playing Guild Wars 1 with Blood is Power, and I think a lot of the Guild Wars 1 community has recognized that lately, so I certainly recommend it too. You get some kind of optional slots in this bar. I picked up Recuperation personally, just for a bit of extra health regen. I like the idea of having a bit, but in general, it's not necessary, and this is actually quite expensive for energy. Maybe there's something more synergistic you could run with for the team concept. I did for a while actually have this slot be a monk that was Elementalist secondary just to get another Firestorm, just to squeeze out even more Battle Standard of Honor value, but I'm not rolling with that anymore. This is a pretty tight bar. So we got basically a heal support here, and then finally we have a soul twisting protection support, essentially. So the Soul Twister as well is pretty standard backline. I'm not doing anything too special with it. I've decided 2 utility skills on this from the Mesmer secondary. So I've got Hex Eater Signet, which allows me to get rid of mass hexes. Basically, if you imagine you're in the Northern Shiver Peaks, Southern Shiver Peaks, you get deep freezed. Then Hex Eater Signet will get rid of it. Maybe you're against Wind Riders or something in Eye of the North, and they're spamming insane quantities of like Conjure Phantasm and stuff on you. You can eat all of these. This is really, really, really useful as a skill. And a little bit of enchantment removal, because honestly, I don't have much, and this helps to round the group out. Beyond that is a standard Soul Twister. Just spams out Shelter, so that even if we get nuked, no one can take more than 10% damage in one hit. Union to reduce the damage we're taking even further, and Displacement to cause us all to block against melee targets. I have a lot of actual melee hate in this comp. There's another fun thing which I'll show you guys in a second. But yeah, that's it pretty much. And then Armor of Unfeeling keeps him going. Boon of Creation keeps his magic. This is his energy high. This character can run low on energy, which is again where the Blood is Power character does well. As long as he can keep Blood is Powering this dude, you'll be very comfortable. So then that leads me to the Ellies. I guess we'll go in reverse order. So the first concept is this. No matter how hard the hero spams, as long as it has elemental attunement and fire attunement, it will always have enough energy to cover itself. Now, they can exhaust themselves with meteor spam. Don't forget, it's not really a 30-second cooldown. It's like a 15-second cooldown a lot of the time. You can really heave these out. But the AI won't ever exhaust itself over like 50%. And because you have so much energy storage, it's fine, really. You can actually play without fire attunement. This is almost an optional slot. If you want more utility, you can definitely do that. And I recommend it, but just kind of as a baseline, this is what I started with. So, yes, Meteor, I think, is very strong. The alternative to Meteor is you do want something to give you exhaustion. The alternative you can run is Breath of Fire. So, Breath of Fire also gives you exhaustion, and it's way more spammable. So, if you run the heroes like this, expect to see tons more AoEs around. I actually played this where everyone was on Breath of Fire, and I've played it where everyone was on Meteor, and I've played it with a mix. So like some people have Meteor to knock into other people's Breath of Fire. You can do whatever you want. Everyone on Meteor is just where I landed, but if you really want to go crazy with the AoE game, Breath of Fire is also an option. I do recommend keeping an exhaustion skill, and I don't really recommend many of the others. I did play, by the way, without elemental attunement for a while so that I could get like Savannah Heat, which is like an elite AoE, but overall I just didn't think it synergized and it worked with everything well enough. So that's kind of the way that I ended up playing this. Searing Heat I think is fantastic. The fact it costs 15 energy doesn't matter because you're proportionally rewarded your energy based on the 2 attunement skills. It's just spammable enough. It does good damage. It's got high quality of life. You don't have to be in late melee for it or anything. It's very decent. Firestorm, I think, you know, some people will question. I would encourage you to remember the fact it was buffed in the later years, and you can basically as long as the standard procs, which it very, very often will, a hero can keep almost permanently a Firestorm up. You know, it recharges in 10 and it lingers for 10. The only question is, were they casting something else in the meantime, and the 1 second cast time itself for it. But you get ludicrous uptime on this. And what's really important about that is, many of you will think about how PvE works, where you run forward, there's a mob of enemies to fight, you kill them, and then you move to the next one straight away. It's like stop-start. And classically, with Guild Wars 1, Firestorm wasn't a long enough cooldown, and the standard and stuff didn't exist, and people didn't have their 40-40 sets up, 40-40 sets set up on all their heroes. So you'd Firestorm to kill one group, maybe, or force them to scatter, and it would annoy people a bit. And then Firestorm wouldn't come up for like the next 2, 3, or even 4 groups you aggroed. And then finally the hero would use Firestorm again, and it would get maybe like 3 or 4 ticks of damage. That's not true if you set it up this way. If you can Firestorm roughly every 10 seconds, trust me, this thing comes up every pull, and you know, maybe one hero will Firestorm their backline, another one will Firestorm the mobs that ran into melee on you, maybe there'll be another one randomly around in the midline. You yourself as a player, if you're choosing to use these skills too, you can kind of place your skills in anticipation of where you think the heroes might miss, and it's genuinely really good. And it just has that big visual element for the theme of the comp, so that's why I ran with it. And I put that on everyone, really. It's just cool. Firestorm has one of the biggest animations in Guild Wars 1. And the idea of spamming it everywhere, that's right up my alley. So then you got the 4th damaging skill, which I've gone with Lava Font, and it's on all of my characters. Now, I want to be clear, Lava Font is not necessary. You could run something ranged, like Fireball, that is also quite spammy, and you'll be fine, right? Fireball's good damage, it hits adjacent and so on. But the proof is really in the pudding. If you're doing this like I am, because you want kind of a normal mode comp to sort of breezily move throughout the environments of Guild Wars 1, because you're going to shoot YouTube videos about it or whatever, don't underestimate this. The reason people don't like Lava Font on heroes is because the AI will see that it has this skill available, and it will say, well, I've got to be close to something, and it will cause your Elementalist to run into melee. And that will take them out of your banners, and that will be a little bit frustrating, and so on. I get it, and it puts them in danger. They're Elementalists, they have low armor, right? However, realistically, there is so much scattering happening, and you have so much pressure. And because we have a Soul Twister and, you know, a reasonably competent backline, the Elementalists aren't getting themselves killed. And because this is like a themed deck where everyone's using it, it doesn't matter that they run forwards, because you can expect them all to run forwards, and you can preemptively put the banners where you know they're going to end up. It's also not a problem when the enemies are all melee and would come into you anyway. What happens is, you know, like a Shirokan warrior or something will run over to your Ellies, and they'll just immediately lava font right next to themselves and decimate them, by the way. I cannot understate how strong this skill is. 53 damage a tick, before we talk about the fact that Elemental Attunement gives you another +2. So it's so much damage that they don't instantly and immediately have all the armor to deal with anymore. If you actually look at all the basic pulsing AoEs in Fire Attunement, hell, all over Ellie, this one hits harder than them all, and by a long way. Maybe only the latest ticks of Savannah Heat, the elite, will actually outpace this. It's a big hitter. And the range is really massive as well. The fact it's on a 4-second cooldown is the really important bit though, right? Because if you get just a little bit unlucky with like one of these 3 skills, let's say you didn't get lucky on Searing Heat and you didn't get lucky on Firestorm, and you're not running Breath of Fire, which is very spammable, but you're running the same Meteor. If this is your setup, the hero can actually run out of things to do, assuming there's no utility to do as well. With Lava Font, that never happens. They can spam Lava Font every 4 or every 2 seconds. That's right. If the Lava Font hits the standard, it will last for 5 seconds, but you can have 2 of them, even 3 for 1 tick, overlapping with one another. This is such a strong skill that it's one of those Ellie skills the devs deliberately dropped the cast time a little. You see how it has a 1.5 second cast time, not 2 seconds? That was deliberately to nerf Mesmer's fast casting. Mesmer's can only hit secondary profession skills if their cast time is 2 seconds or more. And when the Ellie update came in, the devs knew that players would want to use them on Mesmer's, so they made this 1.5 instead. So it still feels pretty close to 2 seconds, but Mesmer's won't get the synergy. Now that's all fine, except we're obviously using Stolen Speed. So these guys will explode these. Actually, Stolen Speed might not hit Lava Font, because it's just around you. It's not actually targeting the hexed target, right? All the other ones will nonetheless. And Lava Font's renewability kind of makes it like your auto attack. I kind of love this, really, and I never realized that Guild Wars 2's Lava Font is kind of played just like Guild Wars 1's one is now. Because in Guild Wars 2, you run in melee and just spam Lava Font at your feet, and that's what your heroes will be doing here. It's so satisfying to see. And so that's the idea. That's kind of the makeup of the damage. Then each Ellie kind of can have its own role. You can have 2 or even 3 utility skills, slots, if you will. Again, because Fire Attunement is somewhat optional. It depends how intense what you're doing and how much you want to wait around between fights, if ever. But Fire Attunement is somewhat optional, so you can have 3 utility skills if you like. For this character, I've actually gone Writ, and once again, I have Mend Body and Soul for Condition Cleanse, and so the Condition Cleanse from Mend Body and Soul will proc off of all the Soul Twisters stuff and the 2 spirits that this guy does. So this is like all your Condition Cleanse you need almost in one, plus Spirit Light again, just to overlap, and this means that you sort of not wiping. But again, you could use whatever other utility you like. This character, I went Ritualist second. This is a really interesting concept. I went with a hard res, because obviously you want some hard reses, but I also took Agony, another spirit. So Agony is the spirit that hits everything in earshot every second, like it does another pulse, and the pulse of damage is very little. It's 8 health loss, that's it. And then it pulses, and then it pulses, and then it pulses. I tried this out because of the synergy with Ebon Battle Standard of Honor. I was like, wow, that's going to mean that Agony does plus 15 damage each pulse, even if I'm not going that hard into channeling, which I actually am in the end. You can go like 10 points in these utility attributes, which is kind of amazing. So just the idea of having even more pulse AoE, I tried almost everything I could. There's a cool Dervish skill, Mystic Sandstorm, that also has amazing synergy here, because they run into Lava Font and then they use Mystic Sandstorm, and Mystic Sandstorm is like a 6-second AoE. The problem with Mystic Sandstorm, though, is that you need Adrenaline, and then to give them Adrenaline, you'd equip an Ellie with a Scythe, and maybe on your Blood Magic guy, you'd put, like, Mark of Anguish, is it? Or the one that gives you Adrenaline. And then you could totally do it, but that would mean that you've got loads of Ellie/Dervishes, less utility, and I just didn't go that angle in the end. In any case, back to Agony. I threw Agony on there with all of my testing, and in theory, I don't think Agony should work, right? Because it's health loss. It's not typed damage, and I'm pretty sure this is only supposed to work with typed damage. That said, looking at Guild Wars Toolbox and assessing how well my heroes are doing, the hero that you put Agony on does amazing damage. Like, amazing damage. It's so cool to see the pressure that they do. And this is actually really high quality of life as well for enemies that have a tiny bit of health and then they scatter. Do you really want to cast a whole Firestorm just to pick him off? Well, Agony often picks people off. They're running around not even fighting you as Agony does that last little bit. It's kind of like the role that Edge of Extinction would be in a composition like this. But Edge of Extinction isn't as spammable and has a really long cast time and can sometimes backfire on you and all that stuff. So Agony's great, and I've definitely seen from the meters of this, unless the DPS meter is bugged, this is definitely well worth it. It's so well worth it, in fact, I have 2 copies. Zed Shadowhoof also is using it, and that's because the spirit does kill itself as it acts, and the AI tends to be smart enough that if one of my heroes, by the way, I'm using mercenaries, obviously, to get an extra 2 elementalists. You don't have to do that. This theme totally works without mercenaries. You would just run your triple Ellie from the game and then fill the other 2 Ellies, or however many you play with like Mesmer/Ellies for fast cast, or more likely maybe even Necro/Ellies, so they can soul reap for energy, and then the Necros can just spam away with all these other tools. But yeah, this character, if he's cast Agony, then Zed Shadowhoof will wait to cast his own Agony until the previous one's dead, and they can kind of leapfrog, and together these guys are like the main DPS powerhouses really of the comp, and I'm pretty sure it's because of the skill. They also get a hard res on them, which is nice. There's also the fact they have a hard res probably just contributes to their death for another reason, their DPS for another reason. The more skills you give a hero that's in a damagey role, the less damage they often do, because they waste time casting stuff that they shouldn't. But if you look at these bars, you know, it's got a 3¼ second spirit that won't be getting spammed that much. That's it. It's not going to proc from the standard or whatever, because it's a binding ritual, not a spell. And then it just goes to spamming what it can. You know, this is passively up, this is passively up. They'll just be doing their damage. That's all the AI has to choose from, 4 skills, and all of them are good in nearly all situations, right? Unless, you know, they're spending too long running around because of lava font. But they won't be much because they have movement speed. I'll show you in a second. And then the hard res they're not using all the time. So yeah, that's those guys. And obviously you could only have 1 Agony if you want and go for more utility. Perhaps you feel that only 1 Signet isn't good enough. You want or 1 Drain Enchantment. And in that case, I would actually recommend what you can do is go and I'll build it for you guys. You can go Mesmer secondary, pick up Domination instead, and take Shatter Hex. So Shatter Hex is hex removal, obviously. But what's really nice about it is these guys are running into melee for lava fonts anyway, so when they use Shatter Hex, they'll do lots of damage with it. In particular, the hero AI is actually set up so that heroes will never cast this unless you have both a hex on you and are in melee, and that can be kind of rare. You know, if you've got this in your comp, a lot of the time, like, the correct playstyle is you as the player need to run into melee, because that will get the AI to do the right thing. Well, they'll do it all automatically. It plays itself because that synergy between Lava Font and Shatter Hex. So that's good. And then you can pick up Shatter Enchantment here as well. This has the advantage that both of these skills are spells, so they can use them frequently. They'll do reasonable damage. The downside is this is pretty tricky on energy, because these are not fire spells, so they won't trigger these. But yeah, so that's a good way of setting it up if you only want 1 Agony. Probably the better way of doing it. Next, Vec. So / Paragons. For most of my comps, I like to have 2 Paragons. Mostly so that I can cast 2 copies of Chain or Fall Back and essentially chain them. So Fall Back will allow you to recover and move fast. No comp feels complete without 2 fallbacks as far as I'm concerned. So here's one of them. The other one I've gone with is Never Surrender. And because we can go all the way up to 10 in command, if we were only 9 in command, this would be +3 health regen. But we get +4 health regen from this. So +4 health regen on the whole team from this character. Plus, I'm running recuperation, so the whole team just has massive health regen in the dangerous situations, and makes me feel very sturdy. So I quite like that, and it means you don't have to run any of these other like weird hybrid pulse heal builds. And then finally, we've got the other Paragon, which instead of running that is running Stand Your Ground, so everyone gets extra armor when not moving. This is a little anti-synergistic. on this comp when people start moving to do lava fonts, because there is a bit of running around, a little bit. What I would say, though, and by the way, fallback allows you to do that. I know fallback ends when you hit with an attack, but the AI isn't auto-attacking as it runs. It's running over to try and lava font. You can't auto-attack while you're running over. So it does work in combat. The thing with Stand Your Ground is it's still well worthwhile because the team doesn't automatically lava font everywhere. What will happen is you aggro, and as you've seen in the footage, they'll stand with you perfectly in the banners, and then, you know, they'll meteor first, and they'll searing heat, and they'll firestorm, and afterwards they'll say, all right, I'll go in then, fine, right? And they'll if you give them breath of fire, they might stand back at you for a really long time, honestly, because you know, they get one breath of fire, then they firestorm, then breath of fire's back again, and they'll cast it again before they finally decide, all right, I'll lava font. But when they move in for lava font, that's where the damage really gets rolling. This is a particularly fun comp when you've got like a tanky boss and they stand in the AoE just a little bit too long, and the damage really spikes very high. So finally, we have my build. Now, this is totally optional. You can run a ton of different ways. For a long time, I was playing Mesmer / Necro, and I was playing Curses so that I could spam the skill Weaken Armor, and so that I could spam the skill, what's it called? The Sacrifice skill that applies weakness to everyone. So I had lots of weakness and cracked armor in the comp. That's what I was doing. I actually ended up settling on this. But I do want to be clear, you can run any number of other things that would actually be way better than what I'm doing. First of all, I think actually the best thing for Mesmer / Ellie to do here is I should just be pure air. You're going to see that I'm relying on an air magic spell, and I could maybe dump all my points in there and go with that. I also think that there's a lot of necro variants that would be good. My build in particular has a bit of an energy problem, and even a frontliner build is probably the best. Run something like a dervish, get in there, cripple people, keep all of the aggro on you, and then they all get blown up. A frontliner is probably the best way to do this, and to then actually offload this fast casting elite onto another character elsewhere in the team. That's probably way more optimal, but this way I get to have all of my Ellie heroes around here. It's your call. The two standards, and really you want to open the engagements with these, so that first volley of spells all your guys use get the value from this. And if they get value from this, it might be a little bit longer before they go to lava font, and then at that point, enemy melee characters have ran into you and they'll lava font without having to move at all. And obviously you just want the standard of honor up with all your other stuff. Then I immediately go into stolen speed, and when you stolen speed, what you really are thinking about is getting AoE out of it. You want to cast it like in the middle of a group. You tend to want to cast in the middle of a group anyway so that you can put the AoEs in the middle of the group. So that all works. You want to hit someone in the center of the pack of the enemies that you're fighting. And I know it looks weird that my whole bar is just one Mesmer skill on it, but I'm taking massive advantage of this. This is fast casting, and you'll see I have 16 fast casting for my attribute. That's as far as I can go with it, and that's not really for the hex duration. Nothing really survives 11 seconds against this, not much. It's not for the hex duration, it's actually for the cooldown, so that I can spam it on more targets faster. And it's also fast casting just so that I can cast Firestorm quicker. Firestorm itself does still have a 2-second cast time, and Meteor itself does still have a 2-second cast time. So I get big value out of having high fast casting for this. So even Fire Attune, oh no, that's just 1 second. I thought that would probably be improved, but I guess not. So then the rest of the bar can be whatever you want. I've gone with 3 damaging skills that are synergistic just with the concept. So I went slash fire magic. I picked up my own Meteor. I picked up my own Firestorm. And I went there, and I even put Snowstorm on. You don't need to use Snowstorm. It's just fun. You could instead run Biooral's Hammer for a nice big res for the group. You could run as well, a big recommendation from me, and I was running this variant for a long time. And if you take this into hard mode, this is 100% my recommendation. Don't take Snowstorm. Take You Are All Weaklings. So You Are All Weaklings looks rubbish and weird, and in my heyday playing Guild Wars 1, I never used this skill. But you just spam it out as a shout, hits all the targets and weakens them, and you can just spam it really, really easily. It's basically full weakness uptime in a good range, far away. Lots of quality of life. You can cast it in the middle of Firestorm. And so weakness is amazing because it cuts down on the damage that the enemies are hitting you with enormously. And it also causes enemy monks and writs and stuff to waste time with Condi Cleanse instead of healing or doing more useful things before they suddenly get nuked. So The weakness all on its own is very, very, very good. You can even bring someone down an attribute threat breakpoint and invalidate their weapon. But where it really shines is you can then take one of your characters, and I usually put it on the restoration guy that I've got here, who's a little bit more defensively oriented anyway. And you can sub out Searing Heat. Don't run Searing Heat. And this is if you're struggling. I've never struggled on this in normal mode, so this is probably more of a hard mode thing. And take 10 Eyes Heat instead. So 10 Eyes Heat is another big AoE, but instead of pulsing damage, it's degen. And I know that's a bit of a shame, because that means you don't get the standard value out of it or whatever. But what this will do is create a big ward around you, much like the banners. And any enemies that have weakness in it attack 33% slower. So that is hugely useful. You have weakness up all the time. And then, because they're in a 10 Eyes Heat, where's our character here? They all attack like it's normal mode again. And that really stops you suddenly getting assassinated anywhere that you might try this out in hard mode. Obviously, it comes at a little bit of a compromise of like losing another meteor, losing a bit of damage. I recommend you keep some form of exhaustion on there, so I would say a bit of damage. But having 10 Eyes Heat on there is a good idea. Another kind of unfortunate thing here is you'll see this skill doesn't recharge conventionally. It gets disabled for 20 seconds, deliberately to break some of these other synergies, but the uptime with one copy is still perfectly high. I did play, by the way, with some other Ellie attributes. Like I liked the idea of having a water Ellie that casts deep freeze and stuff to snare people and keep them in, and you could definitely do that, and in that case, you can have other methods of shutting down frontliners. You don't have to do this combo. Another cool idea I wanted to do was add Earth, and I did try Earth. So you can run like Unsteady Ground to knock people over, or Sandstorm to keep them blind. Earth could also do the same. But I felt that the overall pressure and just ease and comfort and spectacle didn't work with the theme, so I got rid of the idea of running some of those earlies, and this was the closest concept I liked to actually rounding it out. So going back to this bar, something also to talk about. Meteor I'm using because it gives me the exhaustion and it knocks down. Stolen Speed plus fast casting, I can drain through these skills very quick, as you've been watching in the footage. Really quick. And what that means is I'm immediately knocking them into my Snowstorm and my Firestorm with the Meteor. But Meteor's not really there just for that. Meteor's there to exhaust me so that I can use Shell Shock. So you'll see that I have just 3 points in air. I could possibly drop out of fast casting and spam air even more. But I have one air spell, and it's Shell Shock. It's very spammable. It is not a projectile or anything. It will just get conjured onto whatever you've targeted. It is AoE if you're overcast, so you can just basically slap this onto a whole group. And what does it do? A bit of damage and cracked armor. So cracked armor as well is something of a new thing, really, as far as Guild Wars' full history is concerned. Back in Guild Wars 1's main heyday, cracked armor really wasn't much of a thing, but now it's a full-fledged condition. What this does is it means that anything with more than 60 armor, i.e. if it's medium armor or if it's heavy armor, it breaks that back down to 60, I think, is basically the way that it works. So you don't need to cast Shell Shock on enemy monks or ritualists or mesmers and stuff like that. But if you cast this on warriors, suddenly you do massive damage to them. And the other thing is, in this game, rangers kind of have like an innate default ability to resist elemental damage. Shell Shock on the rangers, cracking their armor, helps to break through that. And that's another tool that, you know, previous Ellie comps never really had so comfortably. This idea that this is an AoE spell if you're overcast, that's the kind of that last big Ellie balance patch. And it's such a high quality of life skill. It's really easy. So I have my bar set up that these are like precasts. And then as soon as the fight starts, I just Stolen Speed, drain through 3 quick attacks, and cracked armor. And the second that the cracked armor comes in, they're like knocked down in a billion AoEs that have been fast cast by all the Elementalists all at once. And the fight's going to be done super quickly. They can't nuke you back because of the Soul Twister. Any weird energy issues get resolved by this character. Good heals. And there you have it. That's the idea. It's pretty fun. I will leave all the codes if you guys want to play this in the description. You can obviously see what I did for runes here as we scroll through. And again, just build 40-40 sets as much as you can, wherever you can. And I recommend 20% enchanting on your Blood is Power character as well, just for good measure, to make sure that it lasts a nice amount of time. That's it, really. That's the composition. Pretty fun. I've missed Guild Wars 1 Buildcraft. I really have. I've had a real kick out of this game lately. And I just wanted to share a little bit of that for any of you who are interested. So cheers, guys. Let me know what you think. And if anyone's serious about Guild Wars 1, wants to optimize this, please feel free, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. See you next time, guys.